I am Harper Lane, 26, and my father's name lights up my phone for the 5th time while the afternoon sun lays a bright stripe across my glass desk, the same surface that never held my childhood homework, because that happened at a scarred oak table in a house where I learned to shrink. I let the call fade and read the email that arrives 3 seconds later, a subject line about my sister needing me an ultimatum, tucked like a pin at the end: come to Brooke's wedding or lose future support. I stare at the city from my 5th-floor window, steel and lake opening out like a promise, and feel the old knot settle in the center of my chest anyway. A voicemail follows my father's voice, clipped and commanding, as if I'm still the girl who fetches chair covers and nods on cue. The room is quiet enough to hear my own breath when I pull a diploma from the back of my closet, its gold embossing catching the light proof of a life nobody at home ever bothered to ask about. I check my bank app, see the number that means I owe them nothing, and still the habit of hiding nips at my heels. I open a flight page and begin to type. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from in the comments, and if you've ever had to keep your success a secret, just to keep the peace, tap that like and subscribe so this story finds the people who need it. I grew up in a small Midwestern town where the church bell marked weekends, and summer smelled like fresh-cut grass and gasoline. And in that house, praise traveled a single direction. I learned early that quiet work rarely counts when confetti is waiting for someone else. My parents prized polish-perfect photos, the right kind of laughter trophies that fit a living room shelf, and Brooke fit that picture like a glove, all bright smiles and spotlights while I stacked A's and science ribbons that never earned a spot on the wall. Our mother and father taught us kindness and the value of showing up. Though it took me years to notice how often showing up meant a full row at Brooke's recital and an empty chair at my awards night, people can pass down good words and still miss where those words ought to land. I did not grow hard, but I did grow quiet, and the quiet became useful when I realized the safest way to keep what mattered was to keep it out of sight. Chicago widened my world in a single season. The trains, the rush at crosswalks, a campus where nobody knew the family pecking order. And I earned my scholarship the way I'd earned everything else, one late night after another, until my hands stopped shaking from the only choice that felt like mine. At the University of Chicago, I learned how numbers tell the truth, even when people won't. And that skill carried me into a product analyst role at Apex North Analytics, a desk with a view and a salary that paid the bills without a single phone call home. Still, I kept my diploma tucked behind winter coats and let my last name soften on my tongue when anyone asked about family, because it was easier to be unreadable than to explain why good news felt dangerous. My mentor Nora called it self-preservation and reminded me that boundaries are not barricades. They are doors we choose to open. That idea settled into me like a steadying hand, even as old habits lingered at the edges. The email about Brooke's wedding came dressed in glitter and demanded 2 weeks of festivities, photo shoots, and lists long enough to fill a dining table, and it pushed every familiar button at once, the same script that turned me into a pair of hands before I'd set down my suitcase. I could hear the cadence of my father's instructions even before he picked up the phone, could predict the way my mother would sigh and say it was important to keep the family image tidy, as if image were the same as care. My sister's voice chimed in through a forwarded message about color palettes, and an investor fiancé with a flawless smile, and the whole story felt polished enough to reflect the sky. I looked around my apartment, the ladder-back chair, the small fern by the window, a stack of project notes clipped clean, and realized how far I'd traveled from that oak table, and how close the old tug still sat beneath my skin. I booked the flight and slid the diploma between layers of clothing, not out of defiance, but because it finally felt safe to carry my life where someone might see it. The suitcase clicked shut small and tidy, nothing dramatic, no big speeches or plans to change anyone's mind. I meant to keep my footing, that was all. On the ride to O'Hare, the lake was a flat band of blue, and the skyline held steady, and I told myself that going home for a weekend did not require me to shrink. The city receded behind me as the plane lifted, and I pictured a front porch draped in ivory fabric and a house that loves a good show waiting to tell me where to stand. When the wheels touched down and my phone lit up again, the first new message wasn't about welcome. It was about what I needed to finish by 4. By the time the rental car turned off the main road, the house came into view through rows of white tents and floral arches. The old lane property, once worn clapboard and maple trees, was wrapped now in tulle and roses. The driveway where I'd learned to ride a bike was packed with vans and delivery trucks. I parked behind a florist's van and watched a pair of men carry buckets of long-stemmed blooms toward the porch, their arms disappearing into a sea of cream and blush. For a long moment, I stayed inside the car, hands on the steering wheel, breathing in the faint scent of air freshener and distance. Then I stepped out and walked toward the door. My mother opened it before I could knock. Her hair was a golden shade I hadn't seen before, perfectly set, her perfume lingering like something rehearsed. "Harper," she said brightly, her smile tight at the corners, "you decided to come." The hug that followed was brief, the kind given for cameras, not comfort. "Your sister will be thrilled. We've got a lot to finish today." The house smelled like vanilla candles and new paint, nothing like home. The furniture was rearranged, the walls covered in seating charts and sample fabrics. My father appeared from the hallway, a clipboard in his hand, glasses perched halfway down his nose. He didn't smile. "Good you're here," he said. "These guest bags need assembling and the programs have to be folded before 4. He held out the clipboard as if I were an assistant arriving late to a shift. "I just got in the door," I said quietly. "Then you can start now," he replied, already walking away. From the staircase came the familiar click of heels. Brooke's voice carried before she appeared. "No," I said, cascading, not gathered. "It's ruining everything." She descended the steps with her phone pressed to her ear, her tone sharp as she barked instructions at someone unseen. When she finally noticed me, she lifted one finger to signal I should wait. "Do you understand? This is the most important day of my life," she said into the phone, then ended the call and smiled as if nothing had happened. "Harper. Thank God you made it. The caterer's threatening to quit and Mom can't figure out the seating chart. Can you help with that?" "Nice to see you too," I said, setting my bag down. "Oh, don't be like that," she waved her hand. "You'll meet Nolan at dinner. He's wonderful." My mother beamed. "Brilliant investor, actually. A real success. Crypto investor," Brooke corrected proudly. That evening, Nolan arrived exactly on time, carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than a week's groceries in my old apartment. He was tall, clean-cut, the kind of man who smiled like he'd practiced in front of mirrors. "The famous sister," he said, gripping my hand too tightly. "Brooks told me you're some kind of computer genius up in Chicago." "I'm a product analyst," I said. "Even better," he replied. "I've got friends working on an AI trading platform. Revolutionary stuff. We should talk sometime." Dinner felt like a performance. Nolan spoke easily, spinning stories about partnerships and investments using words like decentralized and exclusive access. My father leaned forward at every sentence, nodding like a man trying to catch the glow of success by proximity. My mother laughed at all the right places. Brooke stared at him as if he'd hung the moon. When the conversation paused long enough for breath, I asked, "Which exchanges do you primarily trade on?" Nolan's smile froze for a split second before he recovered. "Mostly private platforms," he said smoothly. "Invite only through my network. And your company's based where?" He gestured vaguely. "We're decentralized. That's the beauty of blockchain global partnerships, no borders." My father shot me a warning look. "Not everyone wants to talk business at dinner, Harper." Later that night, I went looking for the stack of programs my father mentioned. His study was half buried under papers and unopened mail. A folder lay open on the desk, the word refinance printed across the top. The date caught my eye just 3 weeks earlier. The house that had been nearly paid off was now under a new heavy mortgage. A list of transferred funds followed numbers scrawled in my father's neat handwriting. From the next room came my parents' voices. "Are you sure about this second mortgage?" my mother asked, her voice thin with worry. "That's everything, Richard, my inheritance too." My father's tone was firm. "Elliott guaranteed 20% returns minimum. You wouldn't understand investments like these." I closed the folder, heart thudding. All the signs I'd spent years analyzing at work, risk patterns, unrealistic projections, empty jargon flashed through my mind. But this wasn't data on a spreadsheet. This was my family's home. The next afternoon, Aunt June found me in the garden where she was fussing over the flower arrangements. "You see it too, don't you?" she asked quietly, eyes sharp behind her glasses. I nodded. He's not what he claims to be. Your father won't hear it, she said. He called me jealous when I tried to warn him. Remember Mr. Wilson down the road lost everything in one of those exclusive opportunities last year? Sounded just like this man. A familiar voice called from the fence line. Mr. Green, my old science teacher, waved. Harper Lane, the pride of our high school. Still can't believe you ended up at Chicago, one of the best programs in the country. I froze. My parents had never told anyone where I'd gone. Mr. Green smiled. Unlike them, some of us paid attention. Aunt June patted my hand. Maybe it's time they start doing the same. That night, I brought it up in the living room. My father sat in his armchair reading glasses low on his nose, the same posture he'd taken all my life when conversation turned inconvenient. Dad. Mom. I think we need to talk about Nolan, I began. What about him? He asked, not looking up. There are inconsistencies in his business claims, I said carefully. The way he describes his investments doesn't match how crypto markets work. My mother sighed. Honestly, Harper, you've always been jealous of your sister's happiness. This isn't about jealousy. His numbers don't make sense. My father lowered the newspaper and fixed me with that look I'd spent my childhood trying to avoid. You don't understand business at this level, Harper. Not everything fits into your little spreadsheets. The front door opened, and Brooke stepped inside with Nolan at her heels. She caught the tone instantly. What's going on? Your sister has concerns about Nolan's business, my father said. Brooke's expression crumpled. You're serious? You show up after years away and immediately try to ruin the best thing in my life. It's okay, sweetheart, Nolan said smoothly, slipping an arm around her shoulders. Some people just don't understand innovation. I looked from face to face, my father's irritation, my mother's hurt, Brooke's wounded glare, and Nolan's polite calm, and realized they weren't seeing me at all. I could have presented spreadsheets, police records, hard evidence, and it wouldn't matter. They wanted the story that kept Brooke shining. The truth didn't fit that script. When the argument burned out, I walked upstairs to the guest room, shut the door, and stared at the reflection in the mirror. The same face they'd ignored at 100 family dinners looked back steady but tired. For years, invisibility had been survival. Now it just felt like erasure. I lay awake long past midnight listening to the low hum of voices downstairs. Somewhere between their laughter and Nolan's confident baritone, a single thought took root. They wouldn't believe words, but maybe they'd believe proof. By morning, I knew exactly where to start looking. Outside, the sky was gray with early light. The garden smelled of rain, and the driveway shimmered with dew. I started the rental car and turned toward town, toward the diner, where the same red sign had buzzed since high school. The seat squeaked beneath me as I opened my laptop, the first of many searches that would unravel Nolan's story. The quiet click of his keyboard filled the booth, and with each record that appeared, the pattern became clearer. Different names, same photo, different victims, same promises. Somewhere between the first and second cup of coffee, I realized how deep this trail went and how soon the wedding would be. The next chapter of this visit wasn't going to be about folded programs or seating charts. It was going to be about evidence and the choice between being ignored or being heard. I spent the next morning in the same corner booth at Mason's Diner, where I'd studied calculus on weekends during high school. The red vinyl seat squeaked when I shifted, the same sound it made years ago when I'd scribbled notes for science projects no one came to see. My laptop glowed under the warm light tabs open to business registries, investor forums, and digital footprints. With each search, a pattern began to emerge. 3 names, 3 states, 1 face. Ethan Lewis in Arizona, Edward Lambert in Oregon, and now Nolan Kerr in Illinois. The same polished smile, the same language about exclusive opportunities, and the same trail of vanished funds. Rhonda, the waitress who'd known me since I was 16, stopped by with a coffee pot. "You're still glued to that screen, huh?" she teased, then glanced down and froze. Her brow furrowed as she studied the image on my laptop. Wait a second. That guy, he looks like someone who broke my cousin's heart, called himself Edward something. Lambert, I asked quietly. Her eyes widened. That's it. Ran off right before her wedding, took her savings and her mother's ring. Police said he was long gone. Would she talk to me? Rhonda hesitated, then nodded slowly. She might. Her name's Denise. She's been waiting for someone to listen. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Denise Miller in the same booth, her hands trembling slightly as she held a mug of untouched tea. I thought I was the only one, she said softly. He made me feel like I was finally seen. Promised me a future. She slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photos, bank statements, and copies of police reports, every document a mirror of what I feared for Brooke. He disappeared 3 days before the wedding. Denise continued. $60,000. My mother's heirloom ring, gone without a trace. The pages blurred for a moment before coming back into focus. The same phrasing, the same excuses, even the same email signatures. Denise's voice shook when she added, "The police couldn't do anything, said it was a civil matter." I thanked her, packed up the folder, and stepped outside into the thin autumn light. The air smelled like rain and pavement, the kind that turns cold when the sun fades. 5 days until the wedding. 5 days before Nolan's pattern would repeat itself. When I returned home that afternoon, the house was a flurry of activity. Delivery trucks lined the street. Florists carried boxes of centerpieces through the front door, and my mother stood in the hallway holding a clipboard almost identical to my father's. She barely looked up when she saw me. "You've been gone all morning. Your sister's frantic about the place cards. I was researching something important, more important than Brooke's wedding." She handed me the checklist. "Your father says you've been distracted. Please try to be useful." Her words carried the same familiar weight, pressing down in all the old places. I found Brooke in the dining room surrounded by sample table settings and a pile of crumpled tissues. "The calligrapher messed up the font," she said without looking up. "It's completely wrong. I can call and fix it," I offered. "Dad already did," she replied, wiping her eyes. "At least he supports me." I waited, hoping she might ask where I'd been or why I looked so tired, but the moment passed like all the others. She dabbed at her mascara and said, "You always do this. Disappear when you're needed, then show up to make everything about you. I'm trying to help you, Brooke, by questioning my fiancé, by implying I can't make my own choices." Her voice rose sharp and defensive. "You can't stand that I found someone who loves me while you're off in Chicago doing whatever it is you do." I said nothing. There was no way to explain that my whatever paid more than both our parents combined, or that the reason I was here at all was to stop her from losing everything. I simply placed the corrected place card in front of her and stepped back. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I spread the documents across the living room coffee table. Photo statements and Denise's signed affidavit lay in neat rows under the lamplight. When the house fell silent, I gathered them all into a folder and went to my parents' room. They were both still awake, the television flickering faintly against the wall. My father muted it when I entered. "What is it now? I need you to look at this." I handed him the folder. "These are police records and financial documents from 3 other women, all connected to Nolan." My mother frowned. "That's ridiculous. Please just read them." As they began flipping through the papers, I spoke quietly but clearly. "His real name changes every few years, but the pattern is identical. He promises high returns, convinces families to invest, then vanishes before the wedding." My father's jaw tightened. "Where did you get these?" "From one of his victims." "This is absurd," he said sharply. "You're accusing your sister's fiancé of being a criminal based on some stranger's story. It's not one story, Dad. It's 3. The same photos, the same signatures, the same accounts." At that moment, Brooke entered the room in her robe, her face pale. "What's going on? Your sister thinks Nolan's a con artist," my mother said flatly. Brooke's eyes widened, then filled with tears. "You're trying to ruin my life. I'm trying to protect you," I said. "Look at these reports. Look at the dates." Brooke snatched the papers, scanning them with trembling hands. Nolan appeared behind her, his expression calm but his eyes hard. "This is clearly a mistake," he said smoothly. "People confuse me with others all the time. I have one of those faces. 3 women in 3 different states," I asked, "all with the same story." "Enough," my father snapped. "You've made your point. Leave it alone." "Dad, please, look at the evidence. You don't understand business or people." "Harper," he said, his tone final, "not everything is a conspiracy." Brooke threw the papers onto the couch, her voice breaking. "You've always hated me for being happy. Admit it." The word jealous hung between us like smoke. I could see it in her face, in my mother's silence, in the way my father avoided my eyes. It didn't matter what I said next. They'd already chosen the version of me that fit their story. I took a slow breath. The second mortgage, the retirement fund, all of it's gone if he's lying. Don't you see that? My father stood, his voice rising. "You will not accuse this man in my house. If you can't respect your sister's choices, you can leave." Nolan placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, voice low and reassuring. "It's all right, Mr. Lane. She's just concerned." That practiced sympathy was worse than any insult. I turned to Brooke. "He'll disappear before the wedding. 3 days, maybe less. When he does remember, I tried to warn you." No one answered. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner and the faint rustle of the papers Brooke had crushed in her hands. I gathered the folder and walked toward the door, the same heavy door I'd snuck out of years ago to study at the library. This time, I didn't look back. Outside, the night air was cool, the crickets loud enough to drown out the pulse in my ears. I stood by the car for a moment, keys in hand, staring at the house that had never once believed me. The porch lights glowed soft and steady the same way they always had, like they'd never notice who walked away. As I drove toward town, the reflection of my headlights flickered across the window, and the thought that stayed with me wasn't anger, it was clarity. Some truths are too heavy for people who live on appearances, but the facts didn't change just because they refused to see them. When the first streetlights of downtown came into view, I knew there would be no more convincing. The only thing left was to let the truth unfold on its own. The wedding was 5 days away, and time, as it always does, would tell. 2 days after I left the house, my phone began lighting up before sunrise. At first, I ignored the calls, letting them roll one after another into voicemail. When I finally turned the volume up, the messages came through in a rush. 17 missed calls, 23 texts, 5 voicemails. The first one was my father's voice, brittle and shaking, in a way I had never heard before. "He's gone," he said. "Nolan disappeared last night. Call us back." The second message came minutes later, words tumbling together. "The accounts are empty," he said. "Your mother's retirement, everything. Even the mortgage funds, all gone." In the third voicemail, it was my mother's voice, instead cracked and thin. "The police said without a written contract there's nothing they can do. They called it a civil matter. Please, Harper, please come home. We don't know what to do." I stared at the phone resting on the counter, the screen bright against the quiet of my kitchen. The lake outside my window was silver blue under the morning light stretching endlessly toward the horizon. For the first time in a long while, there was no sound but the hum of my coffee maker. Then another message appeared, this one from Brooke. Short, raw, unfiltered. "You were right. I didn't listen. Please help us." I read it twice, then set the phone down and pressed my palms flat against the counter. The air in my apartment felt heavy, full of the kind of silence that only follows collapse. When I called Nora, she answered on the second ring. "You sound tired," she said gently. "They finally believe me," I told her. "Now that he's gone with their money. And they want your help," she said. "Yes." There was a pause long enough to hear her steady breath through the line. "What are you considering?" I turned toward the window, watching a single gull drift across the water. "I don't know yet." Nora's voice softened. "Boundaries aren't walls, Harper. They're doors you decide when to open. Choose what lets you stay whole." After we hung up, I booked a flight home. This time, I packed only enough clothes for 3 days. The Lane house looked smaller when I pulled up the driveway that afternoon. The white tents were half-dismantled chairs stacked against the fence flowers, wilting along the porch railings. The house that had once smelled of candles and new paint now carried the stale scent of panic. My mother opened the door before I could knock. Her face was bare, her eyes hollow with sleeplessness. "You came?" she said, her voice breaking halfway through the words. She reached out like she wanted to hug me, but stopped short, arms hanging awkwardly between us. Inside, my father was pacing the living room phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, he hung up quickly and looked me over as if assessing what I might offer. We thought he began clearing his throat. Perhaps you could help with some of the financial matters until we sort this out. My mother wrung her hands. What will the Hendersons think? The country club board. Your father is treasurer, and now this mess. Brooke sat curled on the couch, wearing one of my old t-shirts from high school. Her eyes were red and swollen, her voice faint. If you'd been more supportive from the start, maybe I would have listened. The words landed softly, but carried the same familiar sting. You were always so negative about him, she added, twisting a tissue in her hands. I set my handbag on the table and unbuttoned my coat, the weight of travel still in my shoulders. I can help with some things, I said evenly, but not everything. My father straightened his tone brisk again. Now, Harper, as your father, I think I can help file police reports properly, I said, cutting through the noise. I can put you in touch with someone who handles financial fraud, and I can connect you with a lawyer who deals with recovery cases. I ticked the points off one by one. But I can't replace the money you lost. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. I make a good living, I continued, but I won't empty my savings or put my future on hold to fix this. Those are my terms. My father's face flushed, his jaw tightening. This family supported you your entire life, he said. A short laugh escaped before I could stop it. You gave me a roof and food, yes. That's what parents are supposed to do. But support? I met his eyes. You weren't there when I needed it most. Brooke shifted on the couch. So you're just going to stand there being right? That's what matters to you. What matters to me, I said quietly, is being respected, being heard. You need me now, but you've never wanted me. There's a difference. My mother sat down heavily in the nearest chair. How can you be so cold? I learned from experts, I said before I could swallow the words back. No one spoke. For the first time, all three of them were really looking at me, not through me, not around me, but at me. I could feel the shift in the room, the uncomfortable recognition that the child they'd dismissed was now the only one holding steady. These are my boundaries, I said finally. I'll stay 3 days. I'll help you get the right contacts, but I won't sacrifice my future to repair yours. My father took a step toward me, his voice firm again, as though volume could reclaim control. As head of this family, I make the decisions that affect us all. We need to show unity. I sat down on the edge of the armchair opposite him, the same chair where I'd once hidden with books as a child trying to disappear. Unity doesn't mean surrender. My mother clasped her hands together. Blood is thicker than water, Harper. Surely you understand that now. I looked around the room at the trophies still hanging on the wall, each one with Brooke's name engraved beneath a golden plaque. The air felt heavy, filled with the ghosts of years when I'd been invisible. Brooke's voice cracked. You've always thought you were better than the rest of us. Miss Chicago with her big job and her fancy apartment. I checked my watch. They'd been arguing for nearly half an hour, circling the same words like old tracks on a record. I stood slowly. When I was 8, I began. I won the district spelling bee. You both said you couldn't come because Dad had an important meeting, but I saw you afterward at Friendly's celebrating Brooke's participation ribbon from field day. My father's mouth opened, but I kept going. When I was 10, my science project on water purity won at the state fair. You skipped it for her choir concert. High school graduation, you left early to fix her hair for prom. No one interrupted. Even at Christmas, when I brought thoughtful gifts, you handed me a generic card with someone else's name on it. The room fell still, except for the faint tick of the clock. Then the front door opened quietly. Aunt June stepped inside, purse clutched close. I saw it all, she said, her voice trembling, but clear. Every recital you skipped, every achievement you ignored. I watched this child shrink while you praised her sister. My father's face reddened. This is family business, June. I am family, she said, stepping closer. And someone needs to say the truth out loud. I turned toward her and nodded once. Then I faced my parents again. I'll help with the house, I said. I'll arrange debt consolidation, cover the second mortgage, make sure the paperwork is handled properly. But I won't help with appearances. I won't play the part of the daughter who swoops in to save you for the sake of reputation. My father's jaw tightened. You don't get to dictate terms in my house. I do when I'm the one saving it. He stared at me speechless. "The assistance comes with conditions," I said. "It'll all go through official channels with legal documentation. You won't have direct access to any of it." My mother's voice wavered. "We're not a charity case." "No," I said softly. "Charity doesn't come with accountability. This does." The silence that followed was the quietest I'd ever heard in that house. My father sank into his chair, his face unreadable. My mother stared at her lap. Brooke sat motionless, the edges of her tissue frayed between her fingers. I gathered my bag and looked toward the window where the light had begun to fade across the yard. "I'll have my advisor send the documents in the morning," I said. "We'll move forward from there." As I stepped outside, the air felt crisp against my face. Aunt June followed me to the porch. "Will you be all right?" she asked. I looked out across the driveway where the last of the wedding tents had been taken down. "I already am." The sun was setting, washing the house in amber light. Behind me, voices murmured low through the door, familiar, distant, and finally powerless. Some bridges don't burn in fire, they dissolve in truth. And this time, I wasn't the one holding the match. The next morning, the house felt heavier than before. My father was pacing the living room, his voice rising and falling as he spoke to someone on speakerphone. I caught fragments, bank deadlines, insurance claims, and words like collateral and refinancing. My mother stood at the window staring through sheer curtains, as if the right answer might appear outside. Brooke sat at the kitchen table, her face pale and bare of makeup, clutching a mug she wasn't drinking from. When she noticed me, she straightened in her chair. "Did you mean what you said last night?" she asked quietly. "About helping. I meant every word I said, setting my bag down. But it has to be done properly. Legal channels only." My father hung up the phone and turned to me. "We're running out of time, Harper. The bank won't hold off much longer. The mortgage payment is due next week." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm handling this with my advisor. Everything will go through her, not me. It's the only way to make sure no one else gets hurt." He frowned as if the formality insulted him. "We don't need a middleman. This is a family issue." "It stopped being a family issue when you took out a second mortgage for a man you barely knew," I said, keeping my tone steady. The words seemed to echo in the quiet. My mother's hands trembled slightly as she turned from the window. "Harper, please. We've already lost enough. Let's not lose each other, too." "I'm not here to punish anyone," I said softly. "But I can't let history repeat itself. Everything I do from here will be transparent, documented, traceable, and fair." My father drew in a slow breath, his eyes narrowing. "And what gives you the authority to dictate how this family operates?" I met his gaze. "Because right now, I'm the only one who can keep this from getting worse." The silence that followed felt like a long exhale. Finally, he sat down in his usual armchair, the leather creaking beneath him. "Fine," he said. "Explain your plan." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a neat folder. "I'll contact my advisor this afternoon to start the transfer. The funds will pay off the second mortgage directly to the bank, not to you. The remaining debt will be consolidated under a structured repayment plan handled by her firm." My mother blinked clearly, struggling to keep up. "You're paying off the house, I'm covering the balance," I corrected. "You'll sign documentation acknowledging the terms, including a statement that this assistance is a one-time solution, not an open account." Brooke looked between us, her voice cracking. "Why are you treating us like strangers?" I sighed quietly. "Because business keeps everyone honest. You'll still have a home, Brooke. That's what matters." My father leaned back, his jaw tight. "You've become hard, Harper." "I've become careful," I said. "There's a difference." The clock on the mantel ticked loud in the pause that followed. Outside, the afternoon sun spilled across the front lawn, catching on the edges of the disassembled wedding arch that still stood in the yard. My mother's voice broke the silence. "You're certain this advisor can be trusted?" "Yes," I said. "Grace Morton. She specializes in family debt restructuring. Every dollar will go through her and you'll receive monthly reports. Nothing will be hidden." Brooke pushed back her chair, her face pinched. "So you get to control everything?" "No," I said. "You get to rebuild this time without pretending everything's perfect. That's all I'm asking." Aunt June appeared in the doorway, a grocery bag balanced in her arms. "You should listen to her," she said. "Harper's right. You can't afford another mistake." My father stood abruptly. This is still my house, June." "Then act like it," she said calmly. "Sign the papers. Let her help before you lose what's left." He turned away, his shoulders rigid. My mother took the folder from me and began reading the first page, her lips moving silently through the text. Brooke stayed at the table staring at her cold coffee, the skin around her eyes raw from crying. For the rest of the afternoon, I worked quietly at the dining room table, emailing Grace and scanning documents while the house murmured around me. My father shuffled through mail. My mother answered questions from the police about Nolan's disappearance. Brooke drifted between rooms like a ghost. Her phone clutched, but silent. The air smelled faintly of stale flowers and the lemon cleaner my mother always used before company. Just before sunset, Grace called. "Everything looks good," she said. "Once they sign, I'll initiate the transfers and handle all creditor communication. You won't need to be the go-between." "Perfect," I said. "Send the signature copies tonight." She hesitated. "Harper, this is a generous thing you're doing, but make sure you protect yourself legally." "I already have," I replied. "The acknowledgement clause is non-negotiable." That evening, we gathered in the living room. I laid 3 copies of the contract on the coffee table, each page marked with yellow tabs. The lamplight fell across the paper soft but certain. "This outlines the structure of repayment," I said. "It also includes a statement acknowledging that favoritism in this family has caused long-term harm. It's not about blame, it's about honesty." My mother's face went pale. "You want us to sign that? Yes. All of it. If you want my help, everything stays above board." Brooke's eyes filled again. "You're humiliating us." "I'm asking for accountability," I said evenly. My father picked up the pen, turning it in his hand. "We did our best," he said quietly. "Your best was unequal," I replied, not unkindly. "This just makes sure it doesn't happen again." For a long time, no one moved. The only sound was the faint creak of the ceiling fan above us. Finally, my father leaned forward and signed. My mother hesitated, but followed. Brooke took the pen last, her hand shaking as she added her name beneath theirs. I collected the documents and slid them into the folder. "Thank you," I said. "Grace will confirm everything tomorrow. You'll get updates directly from her office." My father cleared his throat. "What happens now?" "Now you breathe," I said, "and you learn to live within what's left." I walked to the window, glancing at the yard, where the last of the wedding lanterns swayed gently in the evening breeze. It was strange how quickly something built for celebration could look like debris. "I'll be leaving tomorrow," I said over my shoulder. "Grace will handle things from here." My mother stood, voice trembling. "You're really going back to Chicago? I have work." "And a life there," I said softly. "You'll be fine." As I turned to go upstairs, Brooke spoke quietly behind me. "Thank you," she said. It was faint, almost swallowed by the hum of the house, but it stopped me in the doorway. I didn't answer. Some words didn't need replies. Later that night, I stood alone on the porch, the cool air brushing against my face. The moon hung low over the quiet street, lighting the edge of the driveway where my car waited. Aunt June stepped outside, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "They'll never forget this," she said. "I know. Neither will you." I looked out toward the yard one last time. That's kind of the point. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. Inside the house creaked with the weight of a new kind of silence, the kind that comes when truth finally settles in. By morning, I would drive away again. But this time, I wouldn't be leaving in anger or fear. I would be leaving on my own terms, with everything finally in writing. And for the first time in my life, the power to walk away would belong entirely to me. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the curtains of the guest room. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of my father's voice somewhere downstairs. I got dressed, folded the loan documents into a leather folder, and headed to the kitchen where my mother was making coffee. She looked older than she had the day before, her hands unsteady as she poured. "Your father didn't sleep," she said softly. "He's been pacing since 4. In the living room, my father stood by the fireplace, his phone pressed to his ear, issuing clipped instructions about loan deferments and damage control. He hung up as soon as he saw me. "We've been talking," he began. Your mother and I think it's best to present a united front. This isn't the time for family disagreements. I placed the folder on the table. It's already done, I said. Grace filed the transfer this morning. The bank will confirm by Friday. He stared at me. You moved forward without my approval. This isn't about approval, I said evenly. It's about stability. You'll have the confirmation by email. Grace will manage all further communication. His mouth tightened. You've made yourself very comfortable making decisions for everyone. I met his eyes. Someone had to. My mother entered, drying her hands with a towel. Richard, please, she murmured. Let's not start the day fighting. He exhaled heavily and sat down the chair, creaking under his weight. This family used to discuss things together. I thought about all the years when discussions had been monologues, when choices were handed down like verdicts, but I said nothing. Brooke appeared a few minutes later, her hair pulled into a loose braid, her face drawn. She sat at the table without looking at me. I heard you're taking care of everything, she said quietly. I'm handling the logistics, I replied. Grace will oversee payments. You'll have full access to the reports. She nodded, twisting her fingers in her lap. Dad says you made us sign an acknowledgement. Yes, about favoritism. My father cut in, his tone sharp. We've already signed it. There's no need to keep bringing it up. Brooke's eyes flicked toward him, then back to me. Was that necessary? I didn't flinch. It was. Transparency matters. For a long moment, no one spoke. The tension in the room felt like the thin stretch before a storm. Finally, Brooke stood, pushing back her chair. I'm going for a walk. After she left, my father leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I've always done what I thought was best for this family, he said quietly. You might not understand that now, but you will one day. I watched him, the way his hands trembled slightly, the way pride still sat on his shoulders like armor. Then this is your chance to do what's best. Again, I said, let Grace handle the finances. Let things run the right way this time. He nodded slowly, but I could tell he didn't fully hear me. Later that afternoon, I went upstairs to pack. Through the window, I saw Aunt June standing by her car, talking to Brooke near the fence. Their faces were tense, their hands moving in sharp gestures. When I came outside, June looked relieved. I was just saying goodbye, she said. Brooke crossed her arms. You've turned everyone against us, she said. I'm not against you, I said gently. I've spent the last week trying to protect you. Her voice wavered. By embarrassing us, by making Mom and Dad sign papers like criminals, by making sure you still have a roof over your head, I said. Brooke's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. You always think you're saving the day, Harper. Maybe you just want to prove you're better than us. The words stung, though, not because they were true. I don't want to be better, I said quietly. I just don't want to disappear again. She looked away. Well, congratulations, she muttered. Everyone sees you now. She turned and went inside the door, closing harder than it needed to. Aunt June sighed. You did what needed to be done, she said. I nodded, though the satisfaction felt hollow. She'll understand eventually. June smiled faintly. Maybe, but understanding takes longer when pride's involved. When evening came, my father called me back into the living room. The air was heavy with unspoken words. We received confirmation from the bank, he said. The mortgage is cleared. He paused, his voice softening slightly. I'll admit, you handled it well. Thank you, I said. He hesitated before adding, You've changed. I had to, I said. Life doesn't wait for permission. He looked down, then back up. When you leave tomorrow, I want you to know, whatever our mistakes were, we did love you. The words landed somewhere between confession and apology. I nodded once. I know. He offered a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, then turned away. That night the house felt strangely calm. I sat on the porch with Aunt June as cicadas droned in the distance. She handed me a mug of tea. You did more than they deserved, she said. Maybe I said, but it's done. Done, she repeated, watching the stars appear through the trees. Funny how that word sounds like peace and ending at the same time. The next morning I left early. The sun was barely up when I carried my suitcase to the car. My mother stood by the door, arms wrapped in her cardigan. "Drive safe," she said. "I will." She hesitated. "You really don't want to stay a few more days? I have meetings on Monday." She nodded slowly, eyes wet. "Thank you for helping us, Harper." "You're welcome," I said. Brooke appeared at the top of the steps, hair pulled back, still in pajamas. "Harper," she called. I turned, expecting another accusation, but her expression had softened. "For what it's worth." "I'm sorry I didn't listen." I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just nodded. The drive back to Chicago felt different this time. The miles passed quietly, the highway unfolding beneath a bright sky that carried no weight of obligation. By the time the skyline came into view, I felt a steady kind of exhaustion, the kind that follows hard truth. When I walked into my apartment, the familiar rhythm of the city hummed outside car horns, voices, the soft buzz of life going on. I unpacked my suitcase, placed my keys on the counter, and sat by the window where the morning light pooled across the floor. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible or small. The quiet wasn't lonely, it was earned. Still, part of me knew the story wasn't entirely over. Family rarely ends cleanly. It just shifts, reshapes, learns to live with the spaces honesty leaves behind. I looked out across the lake, its surface calm and steady, and thought about how even clear water still holds reflections. Somewhere out there, my family was waking to a new reality, one without illusions. And for the first time, I wasn't part of the problem or the solution. I was simply free. I picked up my phone and opened an unread message from Grace, confirming the transfers were complete. The final line read, "All accounts settled." Proceeding as planned. I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. Tomorrow, I'd start fresh. But tonight, I just wanted to sit quietly in the life I'd built and know it was finally mine. 2 months passed before I heard from my family again. The first call came from Aunt June one Sunday afternoon while I was trimming plants on my apartment balcony. She didn't ask for anything. She just wanted to update me. "The house is stable," she said. "Grace set everything up properly. The payments are on time." She paused before adding, "Your parents are quieter these days." I thanked her, and after we hung up I stood there a while, the shears still in my hand. The city below hummed with its usual Sunday sounds. Car horns, children shouting someone's music drifting up from a nearby window. Life was steady again, and for the first time, I could feel it. By late summer, the chaos at work had eased. My projects were running smoothly, and Nora was pushing me toward a senior role that came with its own small team. Most evenings, I stayed late, by choice, not obligation. I liked the rhythm of it, the calm focus, the sound of keyboards instead of family arguments. Then one Wednesday, a message appeared from Grace Transfer completed. Remaining debts settled. She added a single line that made me smile. "All accounts closed, congratulations." It should have felt like closure, and maybe it did. But a week later, a letter arrived with my mother's handwriting on the envelope. It was short, only a page. She thanked me for rescuing the house and mentioned how the neighbors still whispered about Nolan's disappearance. She wrote that Brooke had started seeing a therapist in town and taken a part-time job at the local bank. There was no apology, no reflection, just updates written with polite restraint, as though we were distant relatives catching up. Still, I folded the letter neatly and kept it in my desk drawer. Some bridges didn't need to be crossed again, but they didn't need to burn either. When autumn came, Nora encouraged me to apply for a community mentorship grant, something that would allow me to create a program for first-generation college students. I spent evenings drafting the proposal, remembering what it had felt like to be the invisible kid, trying to find her own way. The application process took months, and by winter the approval letter arrived with a simple statement, "Funding approved. Congratulations on your initiative." The next few weeks moved quickly. I rented a small hall at a neighborhood center and named the program Next Step. It started with 6 students, each of them bright and unsure in the same way I'd once been. One of them, Layla, a shy 19-year-old, reminded me of myself the most. She'd been told by her family that studying computer science was too ambitious for a girl. Watching her light up when she solved her first project made every late night worth it. By spring, the program had grown enough to host an open event. Nora and Grace attended, sitting in the front row, clapping as each student spoke. The evening ended with a local news reporter asking to feature us in a community spotlight segment. I gave a short interview, careful with my words. When she asked what inspired me, I said simply, "Sometimes we spend our lives waiting for others to see our value. This program helps young women stop waiting." That interview aired on a Friday evening, and I didn't think much of it afterward. But 2 days later, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail. Later, curiosity won, and I pressed play. "Harper." My father's voice began tentative but clear. "Your mother and I saw the interview. You spoke well. I didn't realize how much you'd accomplished." A pause followed, then a quieter tone. "I'm proud of you." I sat there at my kitchen table, phone still in my hand, unsure what to feel. It wasn't the sweeping apology of a movie script, but it was something real, the kind of acknowledgement that had never existed before. Later that week, Aunt June texted, "Your dad's been showing everyone that TV clip. Don't let it get to your head." I laughed out loud for the first time in days. Work grew busier that summer, but in a good way. Nora had been right. The promotion came through, along with the small team she'd promised. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Between meetings and mentorship sessions, I barely noticed how far away the old life felt until I received another letter, this one in Brooke's handwriting. It was careful, a little hesitant. She wrote that therapy was helping, that she was learning about patterns of validation and guilt. She admitted she'd spent years believing love was conditional and that Nolan had known exactly how to use that against her. Near the end, she added one line that stayed with me. "I used to think you were lucky for leaving. Now I understand you were brave for doing it." I folded that letter too and placed it beside my mother's. Some stories didn't end with reconciliation. They ended with recognition. By late August, Grace called to confirm that my family's financial case had been fully cleared. "Everything is squared away," she said. "They're in stable standing now." "That's good," I said. "They needed a clean slate." "And you?" she asked gently. "I think I finally have one too." That weekend, I drove to the lakefront early in the morning. The sun was just coming up, turning the water gold. I sat on a bench with a notebook, sketching out ideas for expanding next step into a scholarship fund. A breeze moved through the trees, and for the first time in years I felt light. Not empty, not defiant, just steady. My phone buzzed with another message. "This one from Aunt June, dinner next month. Brooke wants to come too." I looked out over the lake and smiled. Maybe, I said to myself, maybe it's time. The waves lapped softly against the rocks, a quiet rhythm that matched the ease in my chest. Justice hadn't come in a courtroom or a family confession. It had come in boundaries that held in lessons learned and in peace that finally stayed. The sun rose higher, spilling light across the water, and I closed my notebook. There was still one more thing left to do, one more step toward the life I'd built on my own terms. I stood, brushed the sand from my shoes, and walked toward the car. Tomorrow I would file the paperwork to make the scholarship official. But for tonight, I was content to watch the world turn quietly, knowing I had already rewritten the ending. The paperwork for the scholarship fund went through on a bright September morning. I stood outside the small community center where the program had begun, the air crisp with the first hint of fall. The sign on the door read, "Next Step, the Harper Lane Visibility Scholarship for students whose achievements went unseen." I ran my hand over the lettering, half expecting it to feel unreal. A few months ago, I'd been fighting to keep my family from losing their home. Now I was building something that might help others find the recognition I'd once chased in vain. Inside the main room buzzed with volunteers setting up folding chairs for the evening's event. Layla waved from across the room, her eyes bright. "They picked me for that internship," she said, nearly breathless. "The one with the software firm." Her excitement filled the space like sunlight. I hugged her, proud and grateful, knowing she would never have to make herself smaller to be valued. As the afternoon slipped into evening, guests began to arrive, friends from work, students, local mentors, and a few faces from the neighborhood who'd quietly supported the program since it began. Nora stood near the back, her calm presence steady as always. "You did it," she said softly. "You built something that lasts." When it was my turn to speak, I stepped to the podium, my heart steady but full. The faces looking back weren't the same ones I'd grown up trying to impress, yet their presence felt like family in a way that word never used to. I talked about how unseen effort shapes a person, how silence can harden or guide, and how real recognition isn't about applause. It's about knowing your own worth when no one else does. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it felt honest. Afterward, I slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The sky was streaked with orange, the kind of sunset that asks for reflection. My phone buzzed with a new message from Brooke. It was a photo her standing beside our parents on the porch of the freshly repainted house. Beneath it, she'd written, "We're getting there. Thank you for giving us a chance to start over." I looked at the picture for a long time. My father's hair was grayer, my mother's smile smaller but softer. Brooke's eyes carried something new, humility maybe, or peace. Whatever it was, it didn't sting to see it. I typed back a simple message. "I'm glad you're doing well. Tell them I said hello." I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked out at the street where the lights of early evening flickered on one by one. The world had a way of balancing itself when you stopped forcing it to. For years I had waited for fairness, for acknowledgement that never came. I learned instead that justice sometimes arrives quietly through steady choices, firm boundaries, and the courage to stop repeating old stories. When I drove home that night, the city glowed beneath the streetlights, each one reflecting on the hood of my car like a slow-moving constellation. My apartment felt warm when I walked in, the faint scent of lavender from a candle I'd left unlit that morning still lingering. On the wall above my desk hung the framed diploma I once kept hidden. Below it, I had added a smaller frame, a copy of the scholarship's official charter. Together they told the whole story. Later, as I sat by the window with a cup of tea, the lake shimmered beyond the glass, calm and endless. My mind drifted to the girl I used to be, the one who worked in silence, waiting for a family's praise that never came. I wished she could see this view now, this peace that didn't depend on anyone's permission. Sometimes healing doesn't come with grand gestures or perfect forgiveness. It comes with the quiet certainty that you've built a life that no longer needs validation. I had become my own measure of enough. When the night deepened, I turned off the lights and let the city hum beneath the windows. In that sound, I could almost hear everything I'd gained: the dignity of standing my ground, the grace of letting go, and the rare, steady joy of being seen at last. If you've ever had to fight for your own worth, I hope this story reminds you that it isn't lost. It's waiting where you learn to stop apologizing for it. And if you've found a way to rebuild your peace after being overlooked, share it with someone who still needs to believe that they can too. Because sometimes the quietest victories are the ones that last the longest.